Welcome to Shadow Tales Archive. Tonight, we invite you to descend into darkness with a chilling anthology of horror stories, each one inspired by true events. This is episode 11. Let the nightmare begin. The Hollow Night. On October 31st, 2004, it was reported that 6 young adults had perished on the Luova mountain pass in the northern wilderness of Finland. News reports excerpt stated, 4 males and 2 females tragically lost their lives following an expedition made the discovery 50 kilometers southeast of Ivalo, believed to have perished following unfavorable weather conditions. The news reports did not delve into details regarding the specifics of the tragedy. Grieving family and friends of the deceased were informed by investigators that the group had got into difficulty during the early hours of Wednesday, October 27th, after a small avalanche descended onto their camp. Death was caused by hypothermia in all cases, with the exception of Elina Saarinen, whose demise was found to be the result of cerebral hemorrhaging caused by blunt force trauma to her right temporal bone. This was attributed to debris, possibly a large rock or tree branch, propelled at speed through the avalanche. No further details were disclosed. Authorities and law enforcement officers found the ruined camp after being made aware of potential missing persons by concerned friends who informed them that the group failed to contact them on either the 29th or 30th of October to confirm that they had returned safely from the wilderness. The 6 deceased were transported to their respective hometowns to be claimed by their immediate kin. All 6 were transported in closed caskets, which remained closed. Authorities cited the poor conditions of the bodies, exposed for too long to the relentless elements before discovery, as the reasoning behind this. Many people were of the belief that the bodies should, in fact, have been preserved in good condition. But the stricken emotions of the bereaved meant that they did not voice any objections and cause further stress. The bodies were buried, and the tragedy receded into memory for all but the closest family members. It has since been discovered that this information does not amount to the full story of what occurred on that fateful night. Withheld information and retrospective investigations, the results and conclusions of which were secreted away in an archive until now, paint a very different picture of the events which occurred. Presented for your consideration are those missing facts, alongside conjectures and suppositions designed to recreate, in so much as is possible, the true nature of the circumstances which transpired on October 26th and 27th, 2004, on the Luova Pass. The 6 deceased in question are Elias Korhonen, 23, studied for an MA in architectural design. Sofia Niemi, 19, studied for a BA in Finnish language. The aforementioned Elina Saarinen, 20, studied for a BSc in geology. Marcus Tam, 20, also studied for a BSc in geology. Rami Saarinen, 20, studied for a BSc in electrical engineering. Jonas Berg, 21, a Norwegian who studied in the School of Medicine at the University of Tampere. Elias, Sophia, twins Elina and Rami, and Marcus, an Estonian national, all studied at the University of Oulu. Subsequent interviews conducted among staff and students of both universities have been used herewith to help piece together the components of a bizarre puzzle, and the conjectures which will follow in due course. All 6 students lived on their respective campuses, and all lived long distances away from their families. The funerals afforded the authorities time for unofficial searches of their dorms and to conduct interviews away from the watchful gazes of inquisitive families, some unsatisfied with the information released to them. It also allowed authorities to complete their investigations of the dorms of the deceased before relatives were afforded the opportunity to claim the possessions of the dead. Certain known possessions, including diaries, were never claimed by families and have never been accounted for. The 5 attendees of the University of Oulu were a tight-knit group. They were popular among their peers, with the exception of Marcus, who had Gothic tendencies which are the subject of some ridicule by other students, and they spent much of their leisure time together. They were an active bunch, fond of pursuits including hiking, ski-boarding, rock climbing, and abseiling. Weekend sojourns to locations suited for these activities were a common occurrence for the five. Analysis of evidence has revealed that between the 12th and 15th of October, a 6-day long trip to coincide with midterm break was planned. The trek was to commence on the 23rd of October with the group, due to return to the university on the 29th. The five diligently planned their junket. They were experienced adventurers and were only too aware of the potential dangers that awaited them. They laboriously planned every aspect of their trip and inventoried absolutely all equipment and gear which was to be taken on the trip. On the 15th of October, Elias Korhonen received an email from Jonas Berg. The two were good friends from Jonas's time in the University of Oulu, where Jonas studied for 1 year before relocating to the University of Tampere. At the time, before the other deceased members commenced third-level studies, both Elias and Jonas were integrated into a large fraternity who liked to make the most of their weekends, partying, pranks, girls, and occasionally sports. Elias and Jonas in particular, along with Name Withheld, had a passion for outdoor activities. Elias's passion would eventually infect the rest of the Luova Mountain Pass party. Elias invited Jonas to join the planned trip. Jonas accepted. At 9:30 a.m. on Saturday, October 23rd, the Luova Mountain Pass party convened on the grounds of the University of Oulu. Jonas was introduced by Elias to the other members of the group for the first time. They set off on their trip at 9:40 a.m. The intervening days between October 23rd and October 26th are believed to have passed without much incident, with one notable exception. The group traveled in 2 cars and made their way north to the town of Ivalo, located approximately 500 kilometers away from Oulu. They arrived there 2 days later on October 25th. The group are known to have visited several bars in Ivalo before retiring for the night. It is believed that at some point, Jonas and Marcus almost came to physical blows. This is believed to have been caused by simmering, underlying tensions between the two. Jonas disliked Marcus's gothic lifestyle and believed him also to be a homosexual. The situation was only exacerbated by alcohol, and it is thought that Elias and Rami helped to maintain the peace. The group set off early the next day in a southeasterly direction. It was in this isolation that they intended to rock climb and snowboard. They also intended to spend their first and only night outdoors. The group are believed to have enjoyed a successful day of activities. At approximately 4 p.m., they arrived at the Luova Pass, where they decided to set up camp. A forested area lay beyond the pass, but Elias felt that it was too risky to travel further for the shelter, as nightfall was rapidly approaching. The campsite was made on the pass at the base of a steep slope, with a river located 200 m away and a few lone trees dotted around the pass. The group stayed together in one large tent, as the collective temperature produced by body heat was greater than if spread over 2 or 3 individual tents. Digital imagery recovered from the scene showed that the group had a meal at 8:30 p.m. They sat around a paraffin lamp, imbibed alcohol until approximately 11:30 p.m. The group sang songs and played games before retiring to sleep, most drowsy from the effects of alcohol. The paraffin lamp remained illuminated throughout the night. DNA analysis showed that Elias and Sophia shared the same sleeping bag and had sexual intercourse. It is presumed this occurred when the others fell asleep. Semen belonging to Marcus and found in the stomach of Rami indicates that they too had a sexual tryst after awaking briefly sometime between 12:45 a.m. and 1 a.m. At 1:58 a.m., an incident occurred which caused the entire group to suddenly evacuate the tent. It was significant enough to prompt everyone involved to step outside into estimated temperatures of -22 degrees Celsius, without stopping long enough to collect warmer clothing on the way out. They were outside for approximately 90 seconds before returning inside the tent. Images found on Jonas's cellular phone showed that he attempted, probably in a haste, to take photos of Sophia, who appeared to be wearing only a brassiere at the time. His attempts were somewhat unsuccessful, as an object, probably his thumb, partially obscured the lens, which resulted in partial images of her naked buttocks. It is believed that he snapped these pictures unbeknownst to Sophia or any of the rest of the group. Further digital imagery reveals that the group joked and laughed, possibly to brush off the incident, and seemed in high spirits before returning to sleep. The cause of this initial evacuation remains unknown. Analysis of the scene suggests that a light snow fell between 2:30 a.m. and 3:15 a.m., concealing most of the original tracks and footprints. It did not snow again between the time of the incident and the discovery of the bodies. An avalanche did not take place. This was a fabrication on the part of the investigators. At some time between 3:25 a.m. and 3:35 a.m., the fatal events unfolded. The body of Alina Saarinen was discovered 20 m away from the tent. She was found wearing a t-shirt, pajama bottoms, and one thermal sock. It was initially believed that, as she fled from the tent in the darkness, she ran headlong into a single tree, fracturing her skull and fatally wounding her. However, an inspection of the ground showed her footprints moving just past and not into the tree in question before falling from her injury. The injury stemmed from another source. The bodies of Rami Saarinen and Marcus Tam were found in each other's arms, some 540 meters away from the campsite. They both died of hypothermia. Marcus wore only his nighttime attire and a bobble hat. Rami wore nighttime attire and also a coat and his unlaced boots. It appeared that he attempted to keep Marcus warm by drawing him into his unzipped coat. Further analysis of Marcus's body showed that he had sustained 2 non-fatal injuries, a broken rib and a severed tongue. It is believed he unintentionally bit off his own tongue. Marcus was introduced to Rami through Rami's sister, Alina, with whom Marcus shared his geology classes. Their sexual orientation and fondness for one another was never known by anyone, not even Alina. The body of Elias Korhonen was found beside the partially collapsed and partially burnt tent. He wore only boxer shorts and a t-shirt. He, like Alina, died from trauma to the cranium. However, the trauma he suffered was far more severe. An apparent blow to the head completely caved in the left side of his skull, knocking out an eyeball, most of his teeth, fragments of skull, and a large portion of brain matter. The cause of the trauma is unknown. Found embedded in the remains of his head was one solitary hair. The hair was 5 inches long and thick like that of an animal. The hair was jet black, with veins of a turquoise pigment running through its length. Scientists have determined that the hair is organic in descent and not man-made. The species from which it came is unknown. The body of Jonas Berg was discovered in the river, some 600 meters downstream. He had drowned. He was found wearing a one-piece pajama suit, boots, and a trapper hat and a zipper hoodie, which forensics later discovered both belonged to Alina. Traces of Alina's blood were found on the right shoulder of the hoodie. The hat had also been severely damaged and contained Alina's blood and hair. It has been determined that both Alina and Jonas fled from the tent in a similar direction. Jonas, who had picked up a hatchet during his escape, struck Alina the fatal blow with the blunt edge of the weapon. He removed her hoodie and hat, and donning both items to help maintain warmth in the extreme cold, continued his escape towards the river. Analysis of his footprints on the riverbank reveals that he stopped and looked back towards the camp, as if considering his options, before committing himself to the plunge. He drifted downstream until the hood of Alina's hoodie snagged on a fallen tree below the surface of the water. In darkness and panicking, Jonas struggled to free himself, but only served to also catch the sleeve of the hoodie on the fallen tree. Trapped beneath the surface of the water, he quickly drowned. The discarded hatchet, upon which were traces of Alina's blood, was found next to Jonas's footprints on the riverbank. The body of Sophia Niemi was never recovered. No footprints matching hers were discovered at the scene. An inspection of artifacts at the site by authorities also leads them to believe that she was still wearing only a brassiere when she disappeared. 2 weeks after the initial investigation, authorities covertly performed another search of the site. A severed hand was found in a tree 1 kilometer from the campsite. Many of the lower branches up to a height of 5 meters were broken. They were subjected to an extreme weight or pressure. The hand belonged to Sophia. Rigorous examinations of the tent and its contents were carried out. It was initially assumed that the partial burning of the canvas had resulted from an accidental overturning of the paraffin lamp as the group rushed out of their quarters during the second evacuation. This notion has since been scuppered by compelling evidence that suggests Elias intentionally ignited the material, but the fire failed to take. The reason for this arson is unknown. Aside from minor burns and damaged doors, the tent showed no other indications of compromise. Authorities originally suspected that Johannesburg was responsible for the gruesome events at Luova Pass. However, while responsible for the manslaughter of Alina Saarinen, he has been eliminated as the cause of the devastation. It has been established that he was the second to leave the tent after Alina, and his tracks continued only one way, to the river. Attacks from hostile locals or wild fauna, such as lynx, wolverine, or bear have also been eliminated as triggers for the destruction. No foreign human or animal prints were found at the scene. The group also had a hunting rifle licensed to Elias Korhonen, who is a very capable hunter, and 2 Bowie knives within the tent. It would appear that no attempt was made to utilize these weapons for self-defense, despite the fact they were close to hand. In fact, the only item missing from the tent was the hatchet. The last piece of evidence present at the scene was a claw mark, which ripped through the inner door of the tent. The claw mark entered the door near its top and traveled downwards, leaving the material dangling in ribbons. The inner door was never unzipped, as the group were able to move through the tattered remains of the inner door unimpeded. Again, officials have believed a carnivore may have been responsible for the devastation, but an inspection of the claw mark revealed it was 1 swipe, made from an animal with 7 claws on one appendage. The door, while in its taut and undamaged state, would allow for 1 swipe and no more. The presence of 7 claws ruled out any local fauna, which would have a maximum of 5. The lack of any DNA evidence also aided in eliminating a local predator as the culprit, as no hair, saliva, etc. was found. The only item found was the unidentifiable black-blue hair on Elias's body. Alina was known to be the first to exit the tent during the second evacuation. She forced her way through the sealed outer door without undoing the zipper. Damage to the zipper, blood identified as Alina's on the zipper teeth, and a small, fresh wound on her arm confirm this theory. What remains a topic of debate among certain authorities is the nature of the claw mark. It was determined to have struck the inner door of the tent from within. Alina Saarinen fled through the tattered inner door and burst through the secure outer door. The others quickly followed. While the authorities do not know the cause of the destruction that night on the Luova Pass, one irrefutable, disturbing fact remains. The attack originated from inside the tent. Lydia's Grin. I've always been a skeptical, logical person, a critical thinker. At a young age, my father, a doctor, told me that everything outside the physical realm is a myth after I had a nightmare about demons. Hocus pocus, he said, an illusion created by errors of the human mind. By the age of 5, I didn't believe in Santa Claus, the Easter Bunny, or the Tooth Fairy. Nevertheless, I loved horror movies and supernatural subjects because I thought they were fascinating, even from a scientific standpoint. And I think, on some subconscious level, I wanted to discover something so unbelievable as a ghost. That's probably one of the reasons I decided to visit the North Trestle. The North Trestle is an old, outdated railroad bridge that towers high over a narrow part of North Lake, a winding river valley flooded by a dam over 60 years ago. The bridge is even older than the lake, And as with all old things, people perpetuate rumors about the bridge being haunted by a ghost of some kind. The story goes that Lydia, a wealthy girl who went to our high school in the 60s, used to secretly meet her female lover at the bridge on moonlit nights. When her controlling mother found out and wouldn't let her see the girl anymore, she hung herself from the bridge. Apparently, if you walk across the bridge on a full moon, you'll see her. Lydia was a classic story every freshman at our high school heard, and I thought it was just stupid. One day, I decided it'd be fun to go to that bridge and film it for our school newscast, hopefully to put the dumb story to rest. Marcus, our editor, was all for going with me, and our friend Claire wanted to go just to see something happen firsthand. 1 week later, on a full moon, we grabbed a camera and a 2-liter Mountain Dew and headed for the bridge. We took the north road farther and farther out of town, until only pine trees and cornfields surrounded us. This was the part of Catawba County most people didn't think about, a dark corner of the map. Thank God for the full moon, I thought to myself. We hadn't seen a streetlight for miles, and I have pretty bad night blindness. Even basic shapes, I can't make out if the sun is down or the lights are dim. After what seemed like forever, we finally saw moonlight shimmering on water and parked in a marina near the bridge. "Oh, it's cold," Claire shouted as soon as we opened the car door. "Good," I said. "We need a cold, clear night like this. I don't even think we need a light for the camera." But for some reason, the moonlight piercing the cold air was more eerie than total darkness. The way the light trickled through the pine trees to the bare ground. In some odd way, it felt like the night wanted to show us something. As we walked along the rusted railroad toward the bridge, Marcus spoke up. "So, we walked to the middle of the bridge. Eli, you film some there, then walk to the other side of the bridge, then come back. We get at least 10 minutes of film, and I'll edit out the boring parts." Good plan, but the whole thing's gonna be boring parts," I said. "You don't know that, Eli," Claire replied. Walking on the trestle bridge was nerve-wracking in itself. The gaps were easily large enough to step through, and as soon as water was below us, we were at a dizzying height. "Could you jump off this thing? Maybe we should come back here in the summer," Marcus noted. "It's gotta be pretty deep," I added. "Well, you two can have fun with that," Claire replied. She was usually the voice of reason. Just before we got to the middle of the bridge, I was paralyzed. A cloud had covered the moon, and I might as well have been in a cave. "Hold up, guys. I can't see where to walk." They were both shocked. "You can't even see the bridge?" "I can't see my own hand," I clarified. "Just chill out and give me a second." I felt around for the wood ties and made slow progress. "Why do we trust you with the camera?" They laughed. "Don't trip and drop that thing." To my relief, the cloud passed and the moon came out again. Finally, we made it to the bridge's midpoint and sat down to film some uninteresting material. Here we are at the North Trestle, said to be the one and only place to see Lydia's ghost. High school students in our area have heard this story for over a decade. Marcus narrated enthusiastically for several minutes until the low battery light came on. "Oh crap," he said. "Eli, you walk down to the other side of the bridge and come back. That should be enough time for Claire to go get the spare battery." "You're right. I'm not going by myself," Claire spoke up. Fine, I'll go with you," he compromised. They set off back toward the car, and I went in the other direction to reach the other side. Only 5 minutes later, I heard a loud, high-pitched scream. "Claire!" I said out loud. I reasoned she must have tripped or fallen, but when I looked back down the long track, I saw they had both already made it off the bridge. The scream also sounded like it came from the other direction, the direction I was headed. I kept walking, though somewhat more reluctantly. For the first time, a cold breeze blew. Some dull, low noise was now humming. I wasn't sure what it was, or if it was just my heightened hearing detecting some distant disturbance. A few minutes later, I was at the last quarter of the bridge, feeling more confident that the North Trestle was just a bridge, and the only trace of Lydia was 6 feet underground somewhere, dust by now. That confidence was shattered, however, when I looked toward the sky. A cloud was on its way toward the full moon again, and beyond that were a few more clouds. Damn, I said aloud. Seconds later, I was cloaked in darkness. All right, nothing to panic about, I tried telling myself, but the sound of that bizarre scream was still in my mind, and the low humming noise was getting louder. I shuffled and felt for the right steps, slowly making progress toward the other side of the bridge. Eli, something ahead of me whispered faintly. I froze. It had to be the wind. At that point, I just wished I could see something, even just a shadow, but there was no hint my eyes could give me. I walked forward. I thought I heard breathing as I slowly found the right places to step. Suddenly, something rushed past me. I turned around and shouted, "Hey, who is this?" Now I knew my mind wasn't playing tricks on me. Someone was here. It had to be someone there to play a prank on us, I thought. Or some homeless wanderer who wanted to be left alone. I stopped and placed the camera on the track. Having a camera is one more reason for someone to kill me, I reasoned. I'd go back and get it later. For a few minutes I waited until my phone rang. It was Claire. "Eli, we have the battery. Is it you coming towards us? Did you film the other side yet?" I shouted at first chance. "No, it's not me. Go back to the car. I think someone's here." She hung up. Okay, I thought to myself. How do I get back to the car? This person trapped me. I thought about going to the other side, but I'd never be able to find my way in those woods. Even if I could, I'd be on the other side of the lake, and there wasn't another bridge for miles. Damn, I said aloud again. I would have to confront this person, say I'll leave and never come back, and get off this terrible bridge. I shuffled some more in the dark, heading back the way I came. Minutes later, the moon came out again, and I saw it. A figure was coming my way. The bridge was only lit for a few seconds until the moon again disappeared behind a cloud. I shuffled forward, my shaking leg almost falling through a gap. The moon came out again, and it was much closer, only about 200 yards away. But still, it looked like just a shadow. The moon disappeared again, and I shuffled forward, now shaking so much I thought I might fall. When the moon came back out, I stopped cold. The figure was closer now, only about 100 yards away, and I could make out its unusual features. It was limping forward, its arms swinging as if they were sewn on. Greasy black hair hung down to its knees, and its head was tilted to the side. But the face, that's what made my blood turn cold, made my stomach feel sick. It was off-white with a green hue and blank. No eyes, nose or mouth. Just a wrinkled texture like a pumpkin that had rotted. I prayed that the next cloud wouldn't cover up my only light again, but my prayer went unanswered. Darkness fell again. It's someone in a mask, it's someone in a mask, it's someone in a mask. I tried telling myself, but something in me said otherwise. The way it moved was just unnatural. I tried backing up slowly, almost tripping. How cold is this water? I thought. How high am I? Wait, what am I thinking? Why is that an option? What are my other options? I looked up and saw the moon, just about to reveal itself. My legs were shaking like jello, barely holding me up. I had the feeling someone gets just before they bungee jump, though I didn't have a bungee cord. Moonlight crept out from behind the cloud one more time, and I caught one glance. One terrible glance. It stood 10 feet in front of me, head tilted to the side. I was wrong about one thing. It did have a mouth. A hideous smile spread wide across its blank face. Its wrinkled skin spread to reveal black gums and jagged teeth. "Eli," the smiling mouth said. It took one step forward. Instinct took over, like when your hand pulls back after touching a hot pan. My legs threw me sideways, my mind not even calculating how far I needed to jump to avoid the concrete foundation below. My stomach dropped, but I didn't even look at the water I was headed towards. I didn't straighten out or prepare for the impact. For all that time, as the cold air rushed past my body, the image of that grotesque smile was imprinted in my mind. Only at the last second did I twist and avoid my back hitting the water first, as I narrowly missed the concrete. Even submerged in icy water, all that was on my mind was her smile. even shivering in my boxers on the car ride home. All I could see was Lydia's smile. Shadowbound. I've thought about telling this story for quite a while now, and first and foremost, I want to inform you from the very beginning that everything I am about to write is true. I will not be adding anything for the sake of the story, nor will I be using stupid, stereotypical buzzwords to make this seem more terrifying. All I'll be doing is telling the truth. That's all I want to do. So I'll start from the beginning and give a little background. When I was a kid, I began realizing I had a little insight on what was going to happen before it did. Now, by that I mean I sometimes knew what some kid in the class would say next whilst bothering the teacher, or I knew when the phone was going to ring. That sort of thing. I didn't think much of it as a sweet 10 or 11-year-old. I just saw it as pretty cool, I guess. Then came on the feelings of, I've been here before whenever I went new places. I could never remember when, though. I began getting deja vu regularly, which would last maybe 10 or 15 minutes. I'd usually sit back in awe and quietly mouth everything everyone was saying. As I got older, I began referring to it as a sensitivity I had. It wasn't until I was about 14 I realized I also had this sensitivity to spirits. I live in Ireland, so during the famous Celtic Tiger, my parents went all out on a beautiful 250-year-old house. I mean, knocking down sections, rebuilding, re-roofing, repainting, everything. We got to pick our own rooms. I chose the attic. It was terrifying at first, but once we rebuilt a bit, painted it, refloored it, and all that good stuff, it looked pretty fantastic. The only part of the room that still bothered me was the small hatch in the ceiling up into a small boiler room. Just looking at it gave me a bad feeling from the beginning, so I placed my wardrobe under it and put stuffed animals on top to cover it up so I wouldn't have to see it. The first night in that room was quite intense. All through the night, I heard scratches and banging coming from the boiler room. I put it down to being new house noises, until I heard footsteps run across the ceiling, over and over again. This happened every night. I remember mentioning it to my father. He laughed and said, "Unless there's a 4-foot-tall person living up there, you're not hearing anything." Followed by the famous, "You're probably just dreaming." I knew I wasn't. This did freak me out a lot, but surprisingly, I just got used to it and ignored it. I began noticing strange things happening in my room. Little things. My wardrobe doors would be open. I'd close them and go downstairs, come back up, and they'd be open again. Probably just a slant in the floor, my father concluded. Ornaments around my room would be in different positions, that sort of thing. Then came the feeling of being watched very carefully. For every second I spent in that room, I could feel someone or something's eyes burning into me. It was uncomfortable to say the least, but I tried to get on with things. It wasn't long until I began getting night terrors. I saw horrible things I would not like to ever see again. However, the fact they were dreams made it less traumatizing, albeit slightly disturbing. My mother told me she would hear wails in the middle of the night. She'd get out of bed to find me standing outside my door, screeching and crying. She'd ask me what's wrong, but I'd simply shake my head and lower my chin to my chest. I don't remember any of the crying. When I was told I was doing this, I was pretty freaked out. Something like that had never ever happened to me before. I began feeling a bit down being in that house, specifically my bedroom. Each night, I'd find myself thinking about how sad I was, which again was odd for me because I had never had any problems. I was always a happy kid. However, it was to get worse. I'll never forget the night it all went downhill. It was just a regular night, I guess, and I had gone to bed and fallen asleep. I woke suddenly in the middle of the night. Within a second of waking up, I was overcome with terror and dread. I felt something watching me again. Only this time I saw it. I slowly turned my head to the left of me, and there I saw it, a dark black figure staring at me. Its head was cocked forward from its body, looking down at me. I thought I was dreaming, so I sat up, blinked, and rubbed my eyes. No such luck. It was still there, only it looked as shocked as I was. It jolted back, perhaps when it realized I could see it, and slithered down the side of my bed, across the bottom of my bed, and disappeared into the darkness. I couldn't do anything, only sit there in terror and weep quietly. I had never been so scared. I stayed on the couch for a few days after that and avoided my bedroom completely. I changed after that night. I couldn't eat and I couldn't sleep. I couldn't do anything. I was just a terrified mess. It wasn't long before I decided enough was enough and braved the room once again. Due to sheer exhaustion, I managed to fall asleep on my bed for what felt like 5 minutes before waking abruptly. It was there again. Only this time its face was directly opposite mine. This time, though, it was in broad daylight, as I had only managed sleep at about 6 a.m. I think it's fair to say I shat my pants. Some time passed, and I'm not sure how thinking back on it, but I did manage to brush all this off, and I did continue to stay in that room. It was quiet for a while, but before long, I began waking with cuts on my body, slices in my skin, mostly on my back and shoulder blades. Each night, as I tried to sleep, I felt some invisible force clasp my neck. It got harder to breathe each night. I became very depressed, finding myself sitting awake at all hours, knowing I was being watched and contemplating just ending my life. That bedroom became a pit of despair. My father was and still is to this day very skeptical of me and my stories. My mother, not so much. She got frightened by what had been happening and insisted we call the parish priest, typically Irish, I know. Although I'm not religious in any way, I sort of reached the stage of fuck it, I'll try anything, so I went ahead with it. The priest called over. He read whatever it is they read in situations like these, splashed holy water everywhere, and stuck a cross he got from the Vatican in Rome up in the room. That wasn't enough for me. Since I wasn't religious, I felt it was hypocritical of me to believe that would work. So I just moved rooms. I'm still terrified of that attic, and have only been in there for brief moments when I've had to be since. I just assumed the attic was haunted and left it at that. The new room was fine. I was more or less fine for about a year, still slightly traumatized, might I add, and I thought that was it until I moved into a new house for college, and it all started again. I moved towns for college and found a perfect house with some of my very good friends. I had hoped to put everything that happened in my hometown to rest. I was very optimistic about my fresh start. I moved to a really historic city, and the house I live in now is about 150 years old. The first night myself and my housemate stayed there, we were unsettled by scratching noises coming from the walls. We put it down to new house noises. I should have known better, right? And brushed it off. We ignored the nightly banging and scratching. One day, I decided to bring it up due to something that I thought was a bit strange. I explained that I was in bed one night, trying to sleep when I felt my body jerking slightly, as if something was pulling on my quilt. I expected them to laugh, but one of my housemates sat up and explained the strange experience he had only nights before. He said he was in his room, trying to go asleep, and he had had his feet hanging over the end of the bed. He said he was just asleep when something grabbed onto his foot. He said he pulled his legs up to his chest and lay there for a while, pretty shaken. We all went a bit quiet then, and just gazed around the house, getting more and more creeped out. It wasn't long before shit hit the fan in the house. At 6 a.m. every morning, I heard a light wailing coming from one corner in my bedroom. And every morning, I put my head to the wall to listen. Every time I called my housemates to hear it, it stopped. Typically, I think they started to think I was going crazy. It took a long time before they heard it as well. I was pretty relieved when they said the words, "Yeah, I hear it too," because I was beginning to question my sanity. There was then daily banging from the kitchen, switches flicking on and off, and the likes. We kind of just laughed it off all the time. I knew something was up though when I saw a black figure again. I had been sitting on the couch and could see into the kitchen from the corner of my eye. I happened to catch a glimpse of it, staring it at me. I looked over quickly. It was gone. I ignored it and decided not to say anything. I didn't get too freaked out, since I was kind of used to it at that point, I guess. But I lost it slightly when one of my housemates let something slip. We were all at a party, and one of my housemates turned to me and said something along the lines of, "Can you believe what our other housemate saw the other night?" I had no idea what he was talking about, so I confronted the other guy. He sighed and explained how he didn't want me to be scared and wasn't going to say anything, but went on to tell me how he saw a black figure in the bathroom. I wondered if it was the same black figure I saw. We were all very wary in the house from then on. Then came the night it all went downhill again. It was only me and my housemate who had seen the black figure. The other had returned home for the weekend. We were both in the living room working on college stuff when we heard a bang. We both stopped and looked at each other with that shit look. We knew it was starting again. Only this time, it was much more intense. There was banging coming from all sides of the house. It was like someone was quickly moving around the entire house, banging the walls and stomping on the floor. This went on for a few minutes as we sat there in terror. Then it stopped, and the banging continued from just one area of the house, my room. We were kind of in that stage of nervously laughing and looking around. I had been sitting on the couch, and my housemate was sitting opposite me on a beanbag. He was saying something to me when his face dropped. He went completely white and just stared beyond my shoulder. I asked him what was wrong. All he said was, "We need to get out of that room now," and that I wasn't to sleep in my room tonight, since the banging was still coming from there. I calmly asked him, "What did you see?" He ignored me, just gathered our stuff and began going into the other room. I stopped him and calmly asked again, "What did you see?" He was looking past me again and explained how he saw a black figure sliding across the wall directly behind me. We both left that room and locked ourselves into his. We just sat there for a while in silence. I began thinking about all the freaky shit that has gone on in my short lifespan. I began thinking about the significance of these black figures and began wondering if there were multiple black figures or if it was all the same one. The same black figure I woke up to that night years ago. That was when it dawned on me for the first time. Maybe I am the one who is haunted. Whispers from the wall. This is actually a true story, something that really happened to me and my friends when we were in high school. It was very traumatizing for the four of us, and we each are still affected in some way to this day. To give some background information, our town is surrounded by old Civil War battlegrounds, and quite a few of the houses are from that time. Some of them were even old hospitals that were used for the soldiers. So clearly the town just naturally has a creepy feel to it, and it was common to hear of weird things happening in people's houses. Like this one guy I went to school with. When he and his family moved in, they found an old doll that had been left there. They put it back in a closet, but the next day, it was sitting at the top of the stairs. This went on for a long time. No matter how they tried to get rid of the doll, it would always wind up back at the top of the stairs, so they ended up just leaving it there. I could go on and on with all the stories, but I was always indifferent towards them. Nothing had ever happened to my house. My best friends were sisters Claire and Rachel, and they had grown up in one of the houses that used to be a hospital. When they were kids, their dad actually found some old hospital supplies in a basement alcove and made a good bit of money off them. There were times throughout the years that they would mention strange occurrences, but these girls were too logical and hard-headed to believe in anything paranormal. I can think of a few times when I slept over at their house that I would get a bit freaked out, especially in their upstairs bathroom. I would feel like I was being watched, and there would be little noises like someone was in there with me. I told myself every time it was mice. I was incredibly surprised when Claire came to me during school one morning and said, "There's something in my house." She went on to tell me that the night before, she heard knocking on her wall in the corner by the floor, and then it moved to another part of the wall. After a minute, it moved again a few feet down the wall, and the knocks continued to go around the room, sometimes moving up by the ceiling. She finally got the courage to get out of her room and wake up her parents. They went and sat in her room for a little while, but the knocking didn't come back. They told her it had to have been something outside or a mouse in the wall, not to worry, and they would call an exterminator. Claire was absolutely not convinced it was the wind or rodents, and I could see how terrified she was. This wasn't like her. She'd lived in that house almost her whole life, and this wasn't the first time something weird had happened. But this was the first time she thought it could be a spirit. She never believed in that stuff, and neither did Rachel. But about a week later, the same thing happened to her. Rachel woke up to the same knocking, going all around her room. Again, the parents were woken up, and again, they gave the same explanation. But Rachel accepted the explanation unlike Claire had. The knocking kept happening over the next couple weeks, though. And after an incident in the bathroom, Rachel became convinced there was something paranormal going on. She was in the shower when the curtain was suddenly jerked open, forcibly pulled all the way over to the side. There was no one in the bathroom when she looked out, and the door had been locked anyway. She came up with some excuse as to why it happened, pulled the curtain closed, and continued her shower. It happened again. This time she completely freaked out and got out of there. Their parents didn't really take them seriously, even though they admitted to strange things happening in the house themselves. Claire and Rachel became really curious about whether or not their house was haunted. So one Friday night, when their parents were gone to some event, we had the not-so-brilliant idea to use a Ouija board. Rachel's boyfriend Jake got one from his neighbor, and at about 10 p.m. we set up a table in Claire's room and laid everything out. The three of them weren't really serious about it. They didn't actually think it would work, and considered it more as just something fun to do than to prove their house was haunted. I, on the other hand, felt really uneasy about it and believed Ouija boards were not something to play around with. But I was curious too, and they kept insisting I join, assuring me that the board was just a harmless kids game. We set the Ouija board mood, as Rachel put it, lit a candle, and turned off the lights. We got around the table, put our hands on the planchette, and asked the first question. Are there any spirits here with us? We waited, completely silent, for about 5 minutes without any movement at all. Rachel asked the question again, and there still was no movement. We kept waiting, and I remember Jake making a joke, and we all were giggling when the candle went out. It was unsettling to suddenly be in complete darkness, because there was nothing that could have caused it to go out, nothing we could think of anyway. It was sitting on Claire's nightstand, nowhere near the closed window, and there wasn't any air coming out of the vent across the room. But candles go out, and we just relit it. Again, we got settled at the table and put our hands in position. This time Claire asked the questions. If there is a spirit here, let us know. Who's been knocking on our walls? This time the planchette almost immediately started moving. Of course, we all questioned each other, but we all swore we weren't moving a muscle. I know, I definitely wasn't. And I had no reason to believe the others were either, with how skeptical and serious they all were. It moved first to the letter H, and then to the letter I, then stopped. Hi. It was a response that made sense, but it didn't necessarily mean anything, and it could have been one of us that had moved it. Claire continued on. Hi to you too. Are you a spirit? Have you been knocking on our walls? After about 30 seconds, it started slowly moving. Again, we questioned each other, and again we swore we weren't doing it. This time it's spelled SHOWR15. We didn't know what the heck that was supposed to mean. We discussed the possibilities, but couldn't come up with anything that made sense. Then we noticed Rachel had gotten quiet and was just staring wide-eyed down at the board. She reminded us, in a frightened voice, about her experience in the shower, and told us to look at her shirt. It was a fake jersey with a number 15 on it, which of course we had seen before, but didn't connect it with what was said on the board. And then the SHOWR. Could that have meant shower? How we actually contacted a spirit, and it was telling us it was the one who opened the shower curtain on Rachel. Rachel, the most skeptical of us all, didn't say anything more, and just sat very still with her hand on the planchette. I was getting pretty terrified too, but I think we were all a bit mesmerized by what was happening. Claire again asked the questions. Were you in the bathroom with Rachel? Is that what you're saying? Can you tell us who you are? Give us a name? Again, it moved slowly. SCER. This made us even more creeped out, and we asked for a name again. MICL. We thought maybe it was supposed to be Michael. Is your name Michael? Claire asked. Okay, Michael. Why have you been scaring us? Why knock on the walls? This was when the first of two horrible things happened that night. The planchette started moving incredibly fast. Rachel actually couldn't even keep her hands on it, and it was too fast to see all the letters being spelled out. Then the table started shaking violently. It was like it was being picked up and slammed back down repeatedly. And we had all been kneeling around it with our hands on the planchette, so there was no way one of us could have been moving it. After we realized this, we bolted to the door, ran down the stairs, and ended up on the front porch shaking and confused as to what just happened. We tried to make sense of it and tried to come up with something that would logically explain things, but we couldn't. We really made contact with a spirit, and it wasn't a very nice one. There was no way we were going back in the house. Jake waited with us on the porch until Claire and Rachel's parents called and told us they were on their way home. And then he left. When the parents got home and found us on the porch, we told them everything. We were so upset that they believed that we legitimately got terrified. But they tried to convince us that we had subconsciously moved the planchette, and that it was most likely Jake who was shaking the table. They weren't there, and they didn't experience it, or they would have known that none of us was responsible for any of it. We followed them inside, well aware that the Ouija board was still in Claire's room. We made them turn all the lights on, and when we got to Claire's room, they had to go in first. The table was on its side, the board behind it, and the candle blown out. We didn't remember any of it happening, but it was possible one of us had knocked the table over when we ran out. It didn't make sense how the board got behind the table, though. The parents just kind of laughed it off and told us it was our own fault that we were so scared because we had the dumb idea to use a Ouija board. They were right. It was really dumb, but they just didn't understand what actually happened. There was no way we were keeping that thing in the house. And we took it outside and threw it away in the neighbor's trash can. We didn't care that it belonged to Jake's neighbor. He could explain to them what happened. Rachel got grounded for having a guy in the house while her parents weren't home, so she wasn't going to see him for a while anyway. We decided to pile up in Rachel's room for the night, and we had all calmed down a good bit. Maybe it was knowing that their parents were home, or that just maybe they were right and we had caused everything to happen ourselves. We were able to eventually fall asleep with the light on. The second horrible thing to happen that night happened when I got up to pee. It had to have been really late or really early, depending on how you look at it. I laid there for the longest time trying to ignore it and go back to sleep because I didn't want to go in the bathroom after all that happened. I considered waking up Claire or Rachel, but I knew I was being ridiculous. It would only take a minute. I got up, thankful that the light was on in the room, and went out into the hallway. I turned the hall light on before making my way to the bathroom. And when I got to it, I reached my hand in first to turn that light on before going in. I was so freaked out that I kept the door halfway open. The door must have closed while I was washing my hands because I didn't hear it. I just knew that I hadn't closed it. It was such a heavy door that it didn't seem like it could have closed on its own, but I thought maybe the hinges were messed up or something. I would have told myself anything at that point to make myself feel better, because when I saw that it was closed, I was terrified and had to get out of there. I turned the knob, but it didn't move. I tried to stay calm, telling myself it was an old door and they get stuck sometimes. But I kept turning and pushing and pulling, and the knob wouldn't even move like it was locked. It couldn't have been locked though, because I hadn't even closed the door when I came in, and I could see the lock on the knob and could tell it wasn't locked. There was no lock on the other side either. It was like someone was holding the knob, so I couldn't turn it. I kept trying to open the door, getting more desperate and frantic with each passing second. Then there was a knock behind me. It wasn't loud, but I definitely heard it, and I began pushing at the door even harder, not caring if I broke the thing. Then there were more knocks, going all around the bathroom, and the shower curtain started rattling, and I knew there was someone in the bathroom with me. I could even feel that there was a presence. And to this day, I can remember exactly what it felt like. It was like the air had gotten really thick and darker. I completely lost it. I threw my body against the door over and over, kicking it and beating on it with all my strength, while crying hysterically and screaming at the top of my lungs. It couldn't have been more than a couple minutes, but it felt like an eternity. Before I had woken up everyone in the house and they came to my rescue. The dad opened the door. He just turned the knob and pulled, and it easily opened. I came sprawling out onto the floor and was too upset and weak to move. My knuckles were bloody and bruises were forming on my arms. Claire and Rachel stood back in horror as their mom hugged me against her and rocked me back and forth, trying to calm me down. Well, I got a bit calmer. They took me downstairs and I told them what had happened. They had never had a problem with the door before. As sympathetic as they were, I think they believed I had accidentally locked the door on myself and gave myself a panic attack since I'd gotten so frightened earlier that night. If that was the case, then why was the dad able to open the door so easily? And I distinctly remember leaving the door open and seeing that it wasn't locked after it had closed. I heard all the knocks and I saw the shower curtain moving. Claire and Rachel completely believed me and they insisted that their parents do something. They promised that they would look into getting the house blessed the next day and drove me home. They did get the house blessed a few days later, or something similar to it. It was a while before I went back over to the house, and it was only after they all assured me that nothing had happened since that night. I only spent the night one other time, but that was mostly due to the fact that I grew apart from Claire and Rachel as we got older, especially when I switched to another school. We were still friends, but we had outgrown the sleepovers. I still see them, and Jake, sometimes, and we talk on Facebook frequently. We all have nightmares about that night sometimes, and we are very anti-Ouija boards. Their parents still live in that house, and Claire has told me that strange things still happen there. But her parents believe that if it's a spirit, it's a benevolent one. After my experience, I disagree. I don't think it is kind. It is not a kind spirit at all. The shadow outside. My family have been living in the same house for almost 10 years, but not once did we ever encounter anything supernatural or creepy. Probably because we built this house ourselves and made sure no dead bodies were buried in the soil. So we didn't have to worry about previous families having dark histories or such. Nobody has died in the house either, which is why when something disturbing finally happened to me on a certain afternoon, I couldn't come up with an explanation why it happened. It was summer break. You know, those times when you have no school stuff to worry about and you can lay around the house all day. Most of the time, the only people in the house were me, my younger brother, and my grandma. Since my mom was working and my older brother had a summer job. After spending hours on the computer, I finally got bored and decided to take a quick bath since that afternoon felt so humid and hot. You see, our bathroom door has this stained glass design or something. I'm not good at describing different types of glass, so you can see the silhouette of people passing by the door. But the other details like eyes, nose, or mouth are not clear. When my mom got it installed, I hated it because I was a girl and I don't like the idea of people seeing me while inside there, even if it's just my silhouette. Because if you come close enough to the glass, the better the person on the other side will see you. I had 2 brothers, so I don't really understand why the hell my mom installed that thing. Anyway, my bath was going fine until I turned my head and realized a tall figure was standing right outside the door. It surely wasn't my grandma, since she's a short person, so I concluded it was Liam because that guy is freaking tall even if he's younger than me. "Hey, I'm showering. Go away," I yelled, but he didn't even move an inch. He's probably just trying to annoy me again, so decided to throw a shampoo bottle against the door. "Go away." Thankfully, he did go away, and I just finished my shower while feeling a bit pissed. As soon as I got dressed, I went to confront him in his room. He was busy playing in his PC. "What were you doing standing in front of the bathroom like a creep while I was showering?" "I wasn't creeping on you," he simply said without even looking at me. I just rolled my eyes and didn't press any further, since he tends to lie when caught doing some crap, and it won't be easy to make him admit to it anyway. I decided to just shrug it off, because he didn't do it again the rest of the day, so maybe he was just bored that moment. The very next day, I was taking a noon shower again, and when I looked at the door, there he was again, just standing there, and probably watching my silhouette move as I showered. "Liam, go away," I screamed, feeling annoyed, but partly creeped out by my brother's actions. I was starting to think that he probably discovered some porn online, and is now starting to fantasize about stuff. It was downright creepy. Go away, or I'll call MOM. Finally, he started to slowly turn around and walk away, then disappeared into the left hallway. I was about to let out a relieved sigh, but then a different silhouette came running from the opposite hallway and stopped right in front of the door. My blood ran cold when I realized that this person is surely my brother. I can clearly see his brown skin and even the yellow tint of his SpongeBob shirt. The other silhouette, however, was equally tall, but pure black as if just a shadow. "What did you say?" Liam called out, like he really didn't hear what I had been screaming. I wasn't able to answer, because I was still completely shocked about what just happened. It was like my mind just went blank. "Hey, you okay?" Liam's voice snapped me out of it, and I hurriedly got dressed. When I got out, I was greeted by his confused face. I probably looked so pale, because I could still feel myself numb from all that shock. I pulled my brother to the living room and started to explain everything to him. He didn't tease or laugh at me, because even though we piss off each other most of the time, when one of us is totally shaken up, we know something is surely wrong. He explained that he didn't hear anybody else sneak into the house. And we even have 5 dogs outside, for Christ's sake, and none of them barked even once. We didn't want to conclude that it was something paranormal, since, just like I said earlier, we never experienced such things in the house after living here for a very long time. And it happened in broad daylight. Don't paranormal entities prefer to haunt people at night? We decided to approach our Grandma Rose, since she's the one that has experienced odd things during her younger days. All she told us was that spirits tend to visit homes once in a while, even if they don't know the people living in there. She even joked that maybe that certain spirit just fancied me, but that idea only scared me more. The 3 of us agreed to keep the matters from my mother, Mrs. Carter, since she's a full-blown skeptic and would probably just nag me, saying that I'm reading too much horror stuff. It was already comforting enough for me that 2 people sincerely believe my story. Since that last encounter, I don't enter that bathroom without praying, and praying to be kept safe from whatever that thing was. For all I know, it could be a demon, and I sure as hell don't want a demon stalking me. It didn't happen again for a few days, as if to give me a break, but then it visited me again as if for one final goodbye, being the very unfortunate me. It was late at night, and most of the lights were already off, although none of us were asleep yet. I was the last to take a shower, but I made sure I had my phone inside the bathroom with me, since the fear was still crawling around my system. I kept my eyes glued to the stained glass, as I tried to shower as quickly as I can. I was only halfway done washing away the shampoo when I saw the same black figure slowly walk closer to the door. I actually fucking saw how it appeared from the dark hallway, like it has always been there all the time. Heart racing, I slowly reached for my phone, letting the shower stay on, so that thing hopefully wouldn't know that I already noticed it. I was already letting out shaky breaths as I went to my brother's contact number. As soon as I pressed call, and Liam's phone started ringing from somewhere in the house, the figure suddenly reached for the doorknob and started to try and open it. The knob was shaking so violently that I thought it would actually break. At that point, I just lost it. I screamed. I let out the loudest scream I ever made in my whole life, hoping that everyone would hear it and come to my rescue. I just felt so fucking helpless, and it was the most horrifying thing I have ever experienced. I felt like whatever that thing was, it wanted to hurt me. When loud footsteps echoed in the hallway, the figure quickly stepped back and immediately disappeared back into the darkness, as if it was never even there. When I could hear Liam, Noah, and my mom calling for me outside, I fumbled to wrap myself with a towel and open the door. I hugged whoever was nearest to me and cried. Jumbled words of explanation came out of my mouth, and I just hoped that they understood me. Thankfully, Mrs. Carter didn't nag me and stayed beside me the whole night to assure me that I'll be okay. Immediately after that, my mom had that door removed and replaced it with a normal, solid one. Since then, I haven't seen that thing again, though I couldn't deny that I still have this constant fear that one day it will pop in my face and finally get me. I never knew what exactly it was and what it wanted from me, or for all I know, it's actually just standing behind that solid door, staring at the plain, white surface, like it could still see me.
And that was tonight's tale from the Shadowed Tales archive. If it left a mark on your mind, if the silence feels heavier now, then the story did what it was meant to do. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the darkness. New stories are always on their way. Until then, keep the lights low and the doors locked.